The morning started like any other in the great halls of Council Station Alpha. Thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds moved through the curved corridors, their voices mixing into a constant hum of galactic politics. The station hung in space like a massive silver wheel, its windows showing the stars that humanity had dreamed of reaching for centuries. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked quietly through these halls, carrying a simple data pad in his hands. He had made this walk hundreds of times over the past 3 years, but today felt different. Today would be his last day as humanity's voice in the Galactic Council. The other ambassadors barely noticed him as he passed. To them, Jake was just another human, one of the newer species that had joined the Council only 30 years ago. The tall, blue-skinned Vorthans looked down at him with their crystal eyes, thinking their thoughts were too complex for human minds to understand. The warrior-like Kresh ignored him completely, their scaled faces focused on military matters. The merchant Wellens saw him only as someone who might buy their goods. Jake had grown used to being overlooked. Humans were seen as the farmers and builders of the galaxy, useful for growing food and making simple machines, but not important enough to worry about. The Council's real decisions were made by the older, more advanced species. Humans just followed along and did what they were told. Captain Lisa Baker waited for Jake outside the Council chambers. She stood straight and tall in her blue uniform, her brown hair pulled back in a neat style. Lisa had spent 2 years as the human military representative, watching the other species plan battles and make war strategies. They had asked for her opinion exactly 3 times in all that time. "Are you ready for this?" Lisa asked Jake as he approached. Jake nodded and held up the data pad. "It's all here. Simple and clean, just like everything else we do." Dr. Sam Phillips joined them at the entrance to the chambers. Sam had been the human representative on the Council's science board for 4 years. He was a quiet man with gray hair and tired eyes. The other scientists on the board treated his research like simple children's work, never understanding that his practical solutions actually made their complex theories work in the real world. "The files are all encrypted and ready to transfer," Sam said quietly. 20 years of research all locked away where they can't reach it. The 3 humans walked into the Council chambers together. The great room was filled with representatives from 47 different species, all talking and arguing about trade routes and territory disputes. At the center of the room, Council Speaker Zethkar stood behind his crystal podium. The Vorthan leader was 12 feet tall, his body made of what looked like living blue crystal. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like music. Jake waited for a pause in the discussions, then stepped forward. The chamber didn't grow quiet. Most of the representatives kept talking among themselves. Only a few even looked in his direction. "Council Speaker," Jake said in his calm, steady voice, "I have a formal document to present to the Council." Zethkar looked down at the human, with something that might have been curiosity. "Proceed, Ambassador Morrison." Jake held up the data pad and activated the main display screen. The document appeared for all to see, but most of the representatives were still having their own conversations. "Effective immediately," Jake read. "The human colonial government formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. All human representatives will return to human space within 7 standard days. All research agreements, trade partnerships, and military cooperation treaties are hereby terminated." The chamber fell silent. Not because the other species were shocked or upset, but because they were confused. Why would humans leave the Council? They had a good deal: protection from the Kresh military, access to Welland trade routes, and the chance to learn from Nexari science. What more could they want? Zethkar's crystal features shifted in what might have been a frown. "Ambassador Morrison, surely this is a negotiation tactic. What does humanity wish to discuss?" Jake shook his head. "This is not a negotiation, Speaker. This is a formal notice. Humanity is leaving the Council." "But why?" asked Ambassador Veltar of the Nexari Collective. The scholarly species were known for their love of learning, but they had never shown much interest in human knowledge. "Have we offended your people in some way?" "No offense has been given," Jake replied. "Humanity simply chooses to follow a different path." The Kresh military representative, General Throckmar, laughed with a sound like grinding metal. "Let them go. Humans contribute nothing but food and basic tools. We can find others to fill that role. Lisa Baker stepped forward, her military training, keeping her face calm even as her eyes flashed with anger. General, you might want to check your weapon systems before you dismiss human contributions so easily. Throckmar waved a clawed hand dismissively. Human technology is primitive. Our weapons are far superior. Your weapons use human targeting systems, Lisa said quietly. Your ships navigate with human-designed software. Your supply lines run on human logistics programs. Nonsense, Throckmar replied. Those are Kresh systems improved by Kresh engineers. Dr. Sam Phillips spoke for the first time, his voice soft but clear. General, who do you think wrote the code that makes your improved systems actually work? The chamber buzzed with confused conversations. The other species were starting to realize that maybe they didn't know as much about human involvement in their technology as they thought. Zethkar raised one crystal hand for silence. Ambassador Morrison, perhaps we should discuss this matter more carefully. Surely humanity's concerns can be addressed within the council structure. Our concerns are not with the council, Jake said. Our concerns are with the path we wish to take. Humanity has decided to build something new. New? Asked the Welland trade representative. What could be newer than the council? We have maintained galactic peace and prosperity for over 2,000 years. Jake smiled, but it was not a happy expression. You have maintained your version of peace and prosperity. Humanity seeks something different. Amy Johnson appeared at Jake's shoulder. She was the human engineer who had spent 5 years working on the council's infrastructure systems. Most of the other species didn't even know her name, but her work kept the station's life support, power grid, and communication networks running smoothly. The transition protocols are all in place, Amy said quietly to Jake. Everything will. Keep working for about 6 months. After that, she shrugged. What is she talking about? Zethkar demanded. Jake looked up at the crystal being who had led the council for 3 centuries. Speaker, humanity built more of your infrastructure than you realize. When we leave, we take our knowledge with us. What happens after that is your responsibility. The human delegation began walking toward the exit. Other representatives called after them, asking questions, making demands, offering compromises. Jake and his people ignored them all. At the doorway, Jake turned back one last time. The human embassy will be cleared by tomorrow. Our ships will depart within the week. We wish the council well in their future endeavors. And then they were gone, leaving behind a chamber full of confused and increasingly worried aliens. Over the next 3 days, human personnel throughout council space quietly packed their belongings and prepared to leave. They didn't make speeches or demands, they didn't protest or complain. They simply collected their things and headed home. Dr. Phillips encrypted all his research files and wiped the council computers clean of 20 years of human scientific work. Amy Johnson shut down the maintenance protocols she had written for hundreds of council systems, leaving only basic operating instructions that would work for a few months before failing. Captain Baker recalled all human military advisors from council fleets and bases. The weapons systems they had designed, the tactics they had developed, and the logistics networks they had built would continue working for now. But without human maintenance and updates, problems would start soon. The other species watched the humans go with a mixture of confusion and relief. The Vorthans were glad to be rid of what they saw as primitive thinking. The Kresh were happy to have fewer voices questioning their military plans. The Wellands thought they could easily replace human agricultural products with supplies from other worlds. None of them understood what they were about to lose. As the last human ship left Council Station Alpha, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge looking back at the massive station that had been humanity's home in galactic politics for 3 decades. Lisa Baker stood beside him, watching the stars ahead. Do you think they'll figure it out? Lisa asked. Jake smiled, and this time it was genuine. Eventually, but by then we'll be long gone. The human fleet turned toward the outer rim of the galaxy, toward new worlds and new possibilities. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued its meetings, unaware that the foundation of their civilization had just quietly walked away. 3 months had passed since the humans left Council Station Alpha. General Throckmar of the Kresh Empire stood in his command center, staring at reports that made no sense. His latest military campaign against the rebel colonies in the Outer Rim had come to a complete stop, and he couldn't understand why. The Kresh had been fighting these rebels for 2 years. It should have been an easy victory. The Empire had superior numbers, better ships, and weapons that could cut through rebel defenses like paper, but now suddenly nothing was working properly. "General," his weapons officer called from across the bridge. "The plasma cannons are offline again. The targeting system keeps giving error messages." Throckmar's scaled face twisted in anger. "Fix it. We have a battle to fight." "Sir, we've tried. The system won't respond to our commands. It's asking for some kind of access code that we don't have." The general moved to the weapons station and looked at the screen. Lines of text scrolled, passed in a language he didn't recognize. At the bottom, a message appeared in Galactic Standard. "Authorization required. Contact System Administrator." "Who is the System Administrator?" Throckmar demanded. His technical officer, a young Kresh, named Vectar, looked nervous. "Sir, according to the records, it was Captain Lisa Baker of the Human Forces." The bridge fell silent. Lisa Baker had left with the other humans 3 months ago. She was probably halfway across the galaxy by now. "Get me our best computer specialists," Throckmar ordered. "Break these codes. How hard can it be?" But 3 days later, the specialists had made no progress. The human-written software was locked behind layers of encryption that their best minds couldn't crack. Worse, other systems were starting to fail too. Navigation computers were giving wrong directions. Supply management programs were ordering the wrong materials. Even the coffee makers in the mess hall had stopped working. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of Nexus Prime, Dr. Zaleth was having his own problems. The Nexari scientist had been in charge of food production for the entire Nexari collective, and his crops were dying. It had started small, a few fields showing lower yields than expected. Some problems with the automated irrigation systems. Dr. Zaleth had assumed it was just normal variation, the kind of thing that happened in farming. But then the problems got worse. Much worse. The sophisticated farming machines that had been producing record harvests for the past 5 years were breaking down one by one. The soil treatment systems were mixing the wrong chemicals. The weather control satellites were giving incorrect readings. Entire crops were withering in the fields. Dr. Zaleth stood in his ruined farmland trying to understand what had gone wrong. These systems had been working perfectly just a few months ago. The human agricultural advisor, Dr. Karen White, had helped design them during her time with the collective. But Karen was gone now, back to human space with the rest of her people. "Sir," his assistant approached carefully, "the automated seeders are requesting maintenance codes that we don't have." "What kind of maintenance codes?" "Human ones, sir. The systems were built using human agricultural software. Without the proper access, we can't make any changes or repairs." Dr. Zaleth felt a cold fear in his stomach. The Nexari collective fed billions of beings across dozens of worlds. If their food production failed, entire populations would starve. "Contact the human embassy," he ordered. "Sir, there is no human embassy anymore. They closed it when they left the council." "Then contact their homeworlds directly. Offer them whatever they want for help with these systems." His assistant looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we tried that 2 weeks ago. They said they were too busy with their own expansion to provide technical support to non-alliance worlds." Back on Council Station Alpha, Speaker Zethkar was discovering that the problems weren't limited to military weapons and farming equipment. The station itself was starting to show signs of trouble. The first sign had been small things. Elevators taking longer to respond. Air recycling systems running less efficiently. Communication networks having occasional delays. Zethkar had assumed these were normal maintenance issues, but Amy Johnson, the human engineer who had maintained the station's infrastructure, was gone. And apparently, she had taken more knowledge with her than anyone had realized. "Speaker," his chief of staff approached, with a worried expression. "The power grid is showing instabilities. The backup systems are having trouble compensating." "Call the maintenance department," Zethkar replied. "Sir, they say they need the original system specifications to fix the problem. All the documentation they have is incomplete. Then get the complete documentation. It was all encrypted and removed by the human engineering team before they left. We've tried to contact them, but they're not responding to our messages. Zethkar felt a chill run through his crystal body. The station housed over 2 million beings from dozens of different species. If the power systems failed completely, the results would be catastrophic. The Wellen Consortium was having their own crisis. Trade routes that had run smoothly for decades were experiencing massive delays and failures. Cargo ships were getting lost in hyperspace. Automated trading systems were making deals that lost money instead of earning it. Supply chains were breaking down across the galaxy. Consul Brekvan of the Wellen stood in his office, surrounded by reports of financial disaster. In just 3 months, the consortium had lost more money than they had in the previous 10 years. Combined, how is this possible? He demanded of his trade advisors. These routes have been profitable for centuries. Sir, his chief analyst explained, it appears that much of our logistics software was designed by human programmers. When they left, they took the maintenance codes with them. The systems are slowly breaking down. Surely we can fix simple computer programs, Brekvan said. It's not that simple, sir. The human software integrated with our existing systems in ways we didn't fully understand. They made everything work together smoothly. But now that the connections are failing, we can't figure out how to repair them. The analyst showed him a screen full of code. Look at this routing algorithm. It's written in a mix of human programming, languages, and Wellen commercial code. Our programmers can understand the Wellen parts, but the human sections are completely alien to us. Dr. Sam Phillips would have understood that code easily. But Sam was now director of colonial research on the human world of New Terra, working on projects that the council would never see. The medical crisis hit the hardest of all. Across council space, hospitals and medical centers were running out of essential medicines. Dr. Rachel Stone's biosynthesis techniques had been producing 60% of the galaxy's pharmaceutical supplies from her research facility on Council Station Alpha. But Rachel was gone, and her laboratory was locked behind security codes that no one could break. Dr. Helran, the chief medical officer for the Nixari Collective, stood in his empty pharmacy, staring at shelves that should have been full of life-saving drugs. His patients were suffering, and he had no way to help them. Doctor, his nurse approached hesitantly. The cancer treatment medications are completely gone. The heart medicine supplies will last maybe another week. What about the emergency reserves? Gone too, sir. Dr. Stone's synthesis equipment produced most of our stockpiles. Without her processes, we can't make any more. Contact every pharmaceutical company in council space. Buy whatever they have. Sir, they're all having the same problem. They all relied on Dr. Stone's work to some degree. The entire medical supply chain is failing. Dr. Helran sank into his chair, overwhelmed by the scope of the disaster. Billions of beings across the galaxy depended on medicines that only one human scientist knew how to produce properly. Meanwhile, reports were flooding into Council Station Alpha from across the galaxy. The Vorthan communication networks were experiencing strange delays and errors. The Kresh military was finding that their most advanced weapons wouldn't function without human-written software. The Nixari research stations were going dark one by one as their power management systems failed. Speaker Zethkar called an emergency session of the council. Representatives from all the major species gathered in the Great Chamber, but instead of their usual confident discussions about policy and politics, the room was filled with worried whispers and frightened voices. Fellow council members, Zethkar began, his crystal voice lacking its usual authority. We are facing an unprecedented crisis. It appears that human involvement in our infrastructure was far more extensive than we realized. General Throckmar stood up angrily. This is sabotage. The humans have deliberately damaged our systems. No, said Dr. Zaleth quietly. They haven't damaged anything. They simply took their knowledge with them when they left. The systems are failing because we don't know how to maintain what they built for us. The chamber erupted in arguments and accusations. Some blamed the humans for being secretive. Others blamed themselves for not paying attention to what the humans were actually doing. But blame wouldn't fix their problems. What do we do now? Asked Consul Brekvan. We contact the humans, Zethkar replied. We ask them to return and help us fix these systems. And if they refuse? 6 months after the humans left, the galaxy was falling apart. General Throckmar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his once mighty fleet retreat from what should have been an easy battle. The rebel colonies had fought back with weapons that barely worked, ships held together with spare parts and tactics that any military academy would have laughed at. But the Kresh Empire, rulers of 1,000 worlds, had been forced to run away. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the 3rd Battle Group is requesting permission to withdraw. Their main guns are completely offline." Throckmar wanted to order his ships to fight with whatever weapons they still had, but he had learned bitter lessons over the past months. Without the human-designed targeting systems, his plasma cannons couldn't hit anything smaller than a space station. Without the human navigation software, his ships had trouble finding their targets at all. "Grant permission," he said through gritted teeth. All ships returned to base. The rebels cheered as the massive Kresh battleships turned and fled. It was the first time in 500 years that the Empire had lost a major battle, but Throckmar knew it wouldn't be the last. His weapons officer approached nervously. "General, we've received another message from the rebel leader. They're offering to sell us replacement parts for our targeting systems." "Sell us parts? Those primitive rebels?" "Sir, it appears they've been buying surplus human technology from the colonial markets. Their weapons are now more advanced than ours." Throckmar felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. Fear. The Empire's enemies were growing stronger while his own forces became weaker every day. On the other side of the galaxy, the Welland Consortium was facing complete economic collapse. Consul Breck Von sat in his empty office, staring at financial reports that showed losses beyond anything in recorded history. The great trading empire that had built wealth from 1,000 worlds was bankrupt. "How much do we have left?" he asked his chief accountant. "Sir, if we sell everything we own and shut down all operations, we might have enough credits to pay our debts. Maybe. What about the emergency funds?" "Gone, sir. We spent them trying to hire programmers to fix our logistics systems. None of them succeeded." Breck Von looked out his window at the Welland homeworld below. Once, cargo ships had filled the sky like clouds, carrying goods to every corner of the galaxy. Now the skies were empty. The great spaceports stood silent. Millions of Welland workers had lost their jobs. "Sir," his assistant entered quietly, "there's a representative from the Human Colonial Alliance here to see you." Breck Von's heart jumped with hope. "Send them in immediately." A young human woman entered, wearing a simple blue uniform with no fancy decorations. She looked around the expensive office with curious eyes, as if she had never seen such wealth before. "I'm Jennifer Clark from the Colonial Trade Division," she said. "I understand you're having some business difficulties." "Difficulties?" Breck Von almost laughed. "Young lady, my entire civilization is collapsing. Our trade networks have failed completely. We need your help to repair them." Jennifer nodded sympathetically. "Yes, we've heard about your problems. The Colonial Alliance might be willing to provide some assistance." "Anything," Breck Von said quickly. "We'll pay whatever you ask." "Well," Jennifer said slowly, "we could establish new trade routes using our own logistics systems. Of course, we'd need to manage them ourselves to ensure proper maintenance." "You want to control our trade routes?" "Not control, sir. Manage. We've learned that our systems work best when our people oversee them directly." Breck Von realized what she was really saying. The humans would help, but only if the Wellands gave up control of their own economy. It was either that or complete collapse. "I'll need to discuss this with the Consortium Council," he said. Jennifer smiled politely. "Of course. Take your time. We're not going anywhere." But as she left, Breck Von knew they both understood the truth. The Wellands had no choice at all. The medical crisis had become a disaster beyond imagination. Dr. Hellran walked through hospital corridors filled with patients he couldn't help. The medicines that had kept billions of beings healthy and alive were gone, and there was no way to make more. "Doctor," a nurse called from one of the patient rooms. "We're losing another one." Dr. Hellran entered the room to find a young Nexari child dying from a disease that should have been easily treatable. The medicine existed, the knowledge existed, but the production facilities that made it were all locked behind human encryption codes. "Have we heard anything from the human colonies?" he asked. "Yes, sir. They sent a medical team to the border worlds last week." To help us? No, sir. To help human refugees who are fleeing from Council space. Dr. Hellron felt a deep sadness. Across the galaxy, beings were leaving their homes and traveling to human colonies, begging for medical treatment that only human doctors could provide. The refugees were being welcomed and treated, but they had to give up their old lives completely. The humans weren't being cruel. They were simply too busy building their new civilization to spare resources for their former colleagues. On Council. Station Alpha, Speaker Zethkar was facing the worst crisis in the Council's 2,000-year history. The great station that had been the center of galactic government was slowly dying. The power grid was failing in sections. Entire decks had been sealed off when the life support systems stopped working. The communication networks that connected the Council to thousands of worlds were becoming unreliable. Some days, entire sectors of the galaxy went silent. Speaker, his chief of staff reported, "The Kresh Empire is requesting emergency assistance. Their military is no longer capable of maintaining order in their territory." What kind of assistance? They want Council peacekeeping forces to help suppress rebellions. Zethkar almost laughed, but there was no humor in the situation. What peacekeeping forces? Our own ships can barely navigate space lanes without getting lost. Sir, there's more. The Nexari Collective is reporting food riots on 17 worlds. The Wellen Consortium has filed for bankruptcy protection. 3 minor species have announced they're leaving the Council to join the Human Colonial Alliance. The speaker looked around the Council chamber, which was now only half full. Many representatives had stopped coming to meetings because their ships couldn't make the journey reliably. Others had returned to their home worlds to deal with local crises. How many requests for human assistance have we sent? Zethkar asked. 47 official requests, sir, plus hundreds of unofficial messages from individual worlds and organizations. And their response? The same each time. They're focused on their own development and cannot spare resources for non-alliance worlds. Zethkar understood the message. The humans weren't interested in fixing the Council's problems. They were building something new, something better, and they were inviting other species to join them as equals, rather than trying to prop up the old system. Admiral Chuck Davis, formerly the human military liaison to the Council, now commanded the Colonial Defense Force from his headquarters on New Chicago. He stood in his command center, watching displays that showed human space expanding day by day. "Admiral," his intelligence officer reported, "the Kresh Empire has lost control of the Outer Rim completely. The rebel colonies there are asking to join the Alliance. What's our assessment of their military capability?" "Minimal, sir, but they have valuable mining operations and strategic position near the core worlds." Chuck nodded. "Send a diplomatic mission. Full membership offer, same terms as everyone else." "Sir, the Kresh are threatening military action if we interfere in their territory." "With what military?" Chuck asked. "Half their fleet can't leave port because their engines won't start." It was true. The mighty Kresh Empire, which had once threatened entire sectors of the galaxy, was now struggling to maintain order on its own worlds. Their weapons didn't work, their ships couldn't navigate properly, and their enemies were better armed than they were. President Kate Morgan received daily reports about the spreading chaos in Council space. Governments were falling, economies were collapsing, and billions of beings were suffering. But she also received other reports that showed the positive side of the crisis. Human colonies were thriving. New worlds were being settled every month. Scientific research was advancing faster than ever before. The Colonial Alliance was growing as more species chose to abandon their failing governments and join the humans in building something new. "Madam President," her aide entered with the latest batch of requests for assistance. "The Council has sent another formal plea. They're offering to dissolve completely and hand over all authority to the Alliance." Kate read the message carefully. It was signed by Speaker Zethkar himself, and it offered humanity everything the Council had once denied them. Complete authority over galactic government, access to all resources and territory, and the surrender of every Council world. "What's our response?" her aide asked. Kate looked out the window of her office at the bustling city of New Terra. Human. Children played in parks designed with the best of human engineering. Scientists worked in laboratories that pushed the boundaries of knowledge. Farmers grew crops using techniques that fed billions efficiently and sustainably. 1 year after the humans left, Speaker Zethkar stood alone in the council chamber. The great hall that had once been filled with representatives from dozens of worlds now echoed with emptiness. Only 7 species still attended meetings, and they came more to share their problems than to govern anything. The crystal being's light had dimmed over the past months. The station's failing power systems couldn't provide enough energy to keep him healthy, and there were no human engineers left to fix the problems. He was dying slowly, just like the civilization he had led for so long. Speaker, his aide approached carefully. We've received another response from the Human Colonial Alliance. Zethkar straightened, hope flickering in his crystal matrix, and they regret that they cannot provide the technical assistance we requested. They suggest we contact local repair services for our infrastructure needs. The speaker would have laughed if he could. Local repair services. As if any species in council space still had the knowledge to fix human-designed systems. It was like suggesting they contact their ancestors to repair broken history. What about our offer of full partnership? Zethkar asked. Declined, sir. Ambassador Morrison said the alliance is focused on building new relationships, not repairing old ones. Jake Morrison was now the Human External Affairs Coordinator, based on the thriving world of New Austin. His office received dozens of messages every day from council worlds begging for help, offering everything from rare minerals to complete political submission. He read them all carefully, then filed them away. The humans had moved beyond revenge or anger. They simply had better things to do. Dr. Sam Phillips walked through his new research facility on New Geneva, marveling at what human scientists could accomplish when they weren't held back by bureaucratic rules and theoretical limitations. His team had made more breakthroughs in the past year than he had managed in 20 years with the council. Director, his assistant called from across the laboratory. We've got another group of Nexari scientists at the gate. They want to defect to the Alliance. Sam nodded. It happened almost daily now. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and others skilled beings from across the galaxy were abandoning their homeworlds to join the human colonies. They brought valuable knowledge and fresh perspectives, but they also brought stories of the continuing collapse. The usual process, Sam said. Full background check, integration training, and assignment based on their skills. No special treatment, but no discrimination either. The Colonial Alliance had a simple policy for refugees from council space. Anyone who wanted to join was welcome, but they had to leave their old loyalties behind completely. No special privileges for former nobility, no separate communities for different species. Everyone started as equals in the new society. Captain Lisa Baker, now Admiral Baker of the Colonial Fleet, stood on the bridge of the HSS Independence, humanity's newest battleship. The ship was a masterpiece of engineering, built entirely with human technology and crewed by humans and allied species working together as equals. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we're receiving a distress call from the Kresh border. It appears to be a refugee convoy under attack. Kresh military? No, ma'am. Pirates. The convoy is mostly civilian ships carrying families fleeing the Empire. Lisa considered her options. The Kresh Empire had been hostile to humanity for decades, treating them as inferior beings barely worth notice. But these weren't soldiers or politicians. They were ordinary families trying to escape the chaos that their leaders had created. Set course for the convoy, she ordered. Full speed. Ma'am, we'll be crossing into Kresh territory. The Kresh Empire doesn't exist anymore, Lisa replied. It's just empty space with some very scared people in it. The Independence and her escort ships arrived to find a dozen pirate vessels attacking a convoy of refugee ships. The pirates had been taking advantage of the Empire's collapsed defenses, raiding helpless civilians with stolen military equipment. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes. The human ships moved with precision that the pirates had never seen before. Their weapons hit targets with perfect accuracy. Their shields deflected attacks that should have caused serious damage. Most importantly, their crews worked together like parts of a single machine. When it was over, the pirate fleet was either destroyed or fleeing, and the refugee convoy was safe. This is Admiral Baker of the Colonial Fleet, Lisa announced on an open channel. Any ship carrying civilian refugees is under our protection. Pirates and raiders will be dealt with accordingly. The message spread quickly through the chaos of Vayu, former council space. The humans were back, but not as the subordinate species that had left quietly a year ago. They were now the strongest military force in the galaxy, and they were using that strength to protect the innocent rather than conquer territory. General Throckmar received the news in his bunker on the Kresh homeworld. The once mighty warrior now commanded a military that existed mostly on paper. Half his ships couldn't leave port, and the other half could barely defend their own bases. "Sir," his aide reported nervously, "the humans have established a refugee camp in the Kepler sector. They're accepting any Kresh citizen who wants to leave the Empire." "That's our territory," Throckmar growled. "Sir, with respect, we don't control that territory anymore. We haven't had a functioning military presence there for 6 months." It was true. The Empire was fragmenting into dozens of independent systems, each struggling to survive on its own. Some had already applied to join the Colonial Alliance. Others were being overrun by pirates or rebels. A few were trying to maintain the old ways, but they were failing quickly without human technology to support them. "What about our demands for human technical assistance?" Throckmar asked. "They've offered to accept our engineers into their training programs, sir. On their worlds, under their rules. They want our people to become human? They want our people to become citizens of the Alliance, sir, same as everyone else." Dr. Zaleth stood in the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's most productive agricultural world. The farms that had fed billions were now empty fields growing only weeds. The sophisticated machines lay broken and silent. The knowledge to run them was locked away in human minds on distant worlds. A small ship landed nearby, and Dr. Zaleth watched as a young human woman stepped out. She wore practical work clothes and carried a simple toolkit, nothing like the expensive equipment that council scientists always used. "Dr. Zaleth?" she asked, approaching with a friendly smile. "I'm Susan Lopez from the Alliance Agricultural Development Program." "You've come to help us?" Zaleth asked hopefully. "I've come to offer you a choice," Susan replied. "The Alliance is establishing new agricultural colonies in this sector. We need experienced farmers and scientists to help design them. You want me to abandon my world?" Susan looked around at the dead farmland. "Doctor, what world? There's nothing left here to save. But you could help us build something new." She handed him a data pad showing plans for agricultural colonies that made his old farms look primitive. Vertical growing systems that produced 10 times more food in half the space. Weather control that actually worked. Soil treatment that improved rather than depleted the land. "These are your designs?" Zaleth asked. "Human and Alliance cooperative designs," Susan corrected. "We work together. Former Nexari scientists have contributed some of our best innovations." Zaleth realized she was offering him something the Council never had: true partnership. Not subordination or charity, but a chance to help build something better than what had come before. The Vorthon home world was dying. The crystal beings needed specific energy frequencies to survive, and their power systems could no longer provide them. Speaker Zethkar's personal energy levels were so low that he could barely maintain his physical form. "Sir," his aide reported, "the humans have agreed to meet with you." "Here?" "No, sir. On neutral territory. The station at Epsilon Gate." Zethkar knew it was probably his last chance. The journey to Epsilon Gate would use most of his remaining energy reserves. If the humans refused to help, he wouldn't have enough power to return home, but he had no choice. The Vorthan civilization was weeks away from complete extinction. The meeting took place in a simple conference room with basic furniture and standard lighting. Jake Morrison sat across from the dying council speaker, flanked by Admiral Baker, and President Morgan, who had traveled from New Terra specifically for this meeting. "Speaker Zethkar," President Morgan said formally, "we understand you wish to speak with us." "President Morgan," Zethkar replied, his voice barely audible, "I come to surrender." "We're not at war," Jake said gently. "There's nothing to surrender. I surrender the arrogance that destroyed us," Zethkar continued. "I surrender the pride that blinded us to your true contributions. I surrender the ignorance that cost us everything." Kate Morgan studied the dying alien leader with compassionate eyes. "What do you want from us?" "Save my people," Zethkar whispered. "Not as subjects or servants, but as equals. Teach us to be better than we were. The Alliance has citizenship programs, Admiral Baker said. Standard integration process, same as everyone else. You would accept us, after everything we did? 2 years after the humans left the Galactic Council, the galaxy looked completely different. President Kate Morgan stood on the observation deck of New Terra's Capitol building, watching ships arrive and depart from the busy spaceport below. The vessels came from hundreds of different worlds, carrying beings from dozens of species, all working together as citizens of the Colonial Alliance. Madam President, her aide approached with the daily reports. The integration numbers are, and we've processed another 50,000 new citizens this month. Kate nodded, reviewing the data. Former Kresh warriors working alongside Nexari scientists, fourth-hand engineers learning human manufacturing techniques, Welland traders adapting to Alliance commercial law. It was everything the old council had claimed to be but never actually achieved. Any word from the outer sectors? Kate asked. Yes, ma'am. The Kepler colonies are reporting successful harvests. The mining operations in the Ross sector are ahead of schedule, and the research station at Wolf 359 has made another breakthrough in energy production. Each success represented something that would have been impossible under the old system. The Alliance didn't just allow cooperation between species, it required it. Every colony, every research project, every military unit was deliberately mixed, forcing different species to work together as equals. Dr. Sam Phillips walked through his expanded research complex on New Geneva, accompanied by his team leaders, a mix of humans, reformed Nexari, and even a few Vorthon crystal beings who had adapted to working in physical laboratories. The facility was 10 times larger than his old council laboratory, and infinitely more productive. Director, Dr. Zaleth called from across the main lab. The former Nexari agricultural expert had become one of the Alliance's leading food production specialists. The vertical farming tests are showing remarkable results. We can feed 10 times more people with half the land. Excellent, Sam replied. How soon can we implement this on the new colonies? The human engineers say they can have the equipment ready within 6 months, said Velkar, a Vorthon who had joined the team after his home world's collapse. Their manufacturing capabilities are extraordinary. It was true. Human industry, freed from council regulations and restrictions, had exploded across the galaxy. Alliance factories produced goods that made the old council technology look primitive. Ships that were faster, weapons that were more accurate, tools that were more efficient, all designed by mixed teams working without the artificial barriers that had limited the old civilization. Admiral Lisa Baker stood on the bridge of the HSS Liberation, flagship of the Alliance fleet. The massive ship was patrolling the border between Alliance space and what remained of the old Council territories. But this wasn't a military patrol, it was a rescue mission. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we're receiving distress signals from the Proxima system. Appears to be refugees from the Kresh Civil War. How many ships? Approximately 200 civilian vessels, ma'am. They're requesting permission to enter Alliance space. Lisa smiled. 2 years ago, those same refugees would have been trying to conquer Alliance worlds. Now they were begging for protection from the chaos their own leaders had created. Grant permission, she ordered. Escort them to the processing station at Centauri Base. Full refugee protocols. The refugee processing had become routine. Former enemies arriving desperate and broken, expecting punishment or slavery, only to discover they were being offered genuine citizenship in a society better than anything they had known. But not everyone was welcome. The Alliance had strict policies about war criminals and those who had committed crimes against sentient beings. Justice was important, but so was the chance for redemption. General Throckmar sat in a small apartment on New Austin, wearing simple civilian clothes instead of his old military uniform. The former Kresh commander now worked as a security consultant for Alliance colonies, using his knowledge of military tactics to help protect peaceful settlements. It had been a hard adjustment, going from commanding millions of soldiers to advising small colonial defense forces. But it was honest work, and for the first time in his long life, Throckmar felt like he was actually protecting people instead of conquering them. Sir, his human assistant called from the next room. We've got a request from the New Jakarta colony. They're having trouble with pirates in their shipping lanes. Throckmar studied the tactical situation on his computer screen. The pirates were using old Kresh military equipment, probably stolen during the Empire's collapse. He knew exactly how to stop them, and more importantly, how to do it without unnecessary killing. Schedule a meeting with their defense committee, he said. We can solve this problem in 2 weeks. His assistant nodded. She was a young human woman who treated him as a colleague, not as a former enemy or a superior officer. It was part of the Alliance way. Everyone was judged by their current contributions, not their past mistakes. Speaker Zethkar had survived the transition, though barely. His crystal form now glowed with artificial energy provided by Alliance technology, and he worked as a diplomatic advisor helping other species adapt to Alliance society. Speaker, his aide said, the Council archives have finally been transferred to the Alliance historical database. Zethkar looked at the data showing the complete records of 2,000 years of galactic government. All of it was now just history, preserved for study but no longer relevant to how the galaxy actually worked. Have the researchers found anything useful? He asked. They're particularly interested in the early records, before the Council became focused on maintaining control, rather than encouraging progress. It was a painful truth. The Council had started as an organization dedicated to cooperation and mutual advancement, but over the centuries, it had become obsessed with preserving the status quo and maintaining the power of the established species. The humans had simply reminded the galaxy what cooperative civilization could actually accomplish. Dr. Rachel Stone stood in her new medical research facility on New Geneva, working alongside doctors from a dozen different species. Her team had eliminated most genetic diseases among Alliance populations and was working on life extension technologies that would benefit all species equally. Doctor, her Nexari colleague called excitedly. The cellular regeneration tests are showing remarkable success. We could extend healthy lifespans by centuries. Rachel smiled at the breakthrough. Under the old Council system, such medical advances would have been hoarded by the most powerful species. In the Alliance, every discovery was shared immediately with all member worlds. How soon can we begin clinical trials? She asked. The Ethics Committee has already approved initial testing. We could start within months. The Ethics Committee was another Alliance innovation. Representatives from every species working together to ensure that scientific advances benefited everyone fairly. It was slower than the old Council's dictatorial approach, but it produced results that everyone could trust. Amy Johnson walked through the construction sites of New Detroit, watching as massive manufacturing facilities took shape. The city was becoming the industrial heart of the Alliance, producing everything from starships to farming equipment using techniques that combined the best knowledge from all member species. Engineer Johnson, her construction supervisor, called. The new assembly lines are ready for testing. Amy nodded, checking her tablet. The production capabilities they were building would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. But when humans were free to innovate and other species were free to contribute their expertise, amazing things became routine. Let's see what we can build, she said. The first items off the production line were medical supplies destined for refugee camps in former Council space. The Alliance didn't ignore the suffering in the old territories. They simply dealt with it on their own terms, providing aid to those who needed it while building something better for the future. President Morgan received the final report on the old Council territories with mixed feelings. The Galactic Council had officially dissolved 3 months ago. The last Council meeting had been attended by exactly 3 representatives, and they had spent most of their time arguing about who was responsible for their failures. Some former Council worlds had descended into chaos and civil war. Others had been taken over by local warlords or criminal organizations. A few were struggling to maintain some semblance of civilization with whatever technology still worked, but many had chosen a different path. Over 60 former Council species had applied for Alliance membership, and more applications arrived every week. Each one went through the same process: integration training, cultural adaptation, and gradual acceptance as equal citizens. Final numbers, Madam President, her aide reported. The Alliance now includes 112 different species across 438 worlds. Kate looked at the map showing Alliance territory expanding across the galaxy. Not through conquest or force, but through voluntary association. Species joining because they wanted to be part of something better, not because they had no choice. Any word from the Historical Research Project, she asked. Yes, ma'am. The final report on the Council's collapse has been completed.